Financial pitfalls by age during unique times like a pandemic.
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting, Brian, because obviously we've done this before. We've talked about financial mistakes that we can make in our 20s and our 30s and our 40s. But whenever things are unique, especially like what we've recently come through with COVID and the pandemic, we recognize that there are some financial mistakes that we can make unique and specific to those times that we can make at other times, but they get exacerbated during these times, and we ought to be aware of them.
Yeah, and I think it'd be helpful for anybody, and we wanted to do it by age, where these would be things, we've covered a lot of these topics in detail, but we needed something to kind of just be trigger points.
Sure.
We would say, hey, let this be something I need to be aware of, be careful of. This is a pitfall, and then I need to go back and do a little bit more research on that because we're going to move. We got a lot to cover here, so I want to make sure that we trigger you where you need to be thinking about things and make you better for it.
So let's jump right in and start with some of the pandemic financial pitfalls that you ought to be aware of if you're in your 20s. And this first one, I feel like this is almost a public service announcement by us, Brian, because I think that potentially like bloggers and the media and the financial world is painting in a positive light something that maybe shouldn't be seen as quite so positive.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of people hurting. I mean, I think it is great that unemployment benefits, part of CARES Act is that they boosted in the short term how much unemployment payment was going to be. And we'll probably be struggling with this all the way through July, but there's been an unanticipated downside to it. And the fact that there are a large portion of people that are making more money on unemployment than they are actually working. But I am so happy that these people actually have money coming in. Mm-hmm. But here's the two big pitfalls that we wanted to make people aware of. Realize that this will end at the end of July. So don't use this. Use this for what it's meant to. Is this supposed to be a bridge to get you back to gainful employment? Don't let this thing sit out there too long so that you have gaps in your resume because people will notice that. And they're also going to ask you questions, so you need to be prepared.
We've even seen this when we have other business owner friends who've said, hey, okay, I've been able to open back up, I've been able to go back to business, but I can't get my workforce to come back because they say, well, I'm making more on unemployment or whatever. Recognize that employer is probably going to make the decision. If you're not willing to come back to work, they're going to find someone who will. So potentially you thinking that you're kind of, I don't want to say gaming, but taking advantage mathematically of the more advantageous pay structure, maybe missing out on the availability to get that job back long term.
It's like most things. If you need it, use the resource. That's what unemployment insurance is there for. That's what your employer pays for it. But if you're starting to find that you're gaming the system, you might be in gray zone. I mean, it was all those things that were part of the CARES Act. If you're gaming it and not using it for the intent, you're probably on shaky ground. Moving on. Number 2, you've got to keep it out of the ditch financially by having your deductibles covered. You're probably realizing right now that stat that comes out every year that 60% of Americans don't have $1,000. When you have crazy stuff going on, cash kind of is king to have liquidity.
That's right. For those of you that are in your 20s, just starting out in your careers, you have to go check out our show, Financial Order of Operations, because the very first step in the financial order of operations is to make sure that you have your health insurance deductible, your auto deductible, if you own a house, your homeowner's deductible covered so that, just like you said, when that train hits you on a Tuesday night, you're ready for it.
And then this is another one for 20-year-olds, because 20-year-olds, let's face it, we're all, when I was in my 20s, broke. I just didn't, I mean, because you're in the stage of your career that you're learning on the job, you're trying to get your 5 years so you can get your 10,000 hours. It makes sense that money is not necessarily easy.
Sure.
So we tell people, especially when you're facing situations where maybe cash is leaner, because incomes are down because of everything that's going on, don't rack up debt. That is a danger that I think a lot of 20-year-olds face.
Yeah, the one thing that we see in our 20s is that we have a scarcity of resources, but a plethora of folks who are willing to let us borrow money to maybe, I think you said all the time, fake it until we make it. We want to be able to live a certain lifestyle or do a certain type of thing. And there are tons of industries that are built around allowing you as an individual to live beyond your means.
Now, we have built an entire platform off the power of compounding interest. We talk about army of dollar bills. But, Bo, I got to tell you, there's a dark side to compounding interest when you're not harnessing that power for good, for yourself, for building your financial independence. It can actually work against you. And when you build up high interest credit card debt, You firsthand get to experience that. And we tasked full-time equivalent Daniel with coming up with some teachable moments from this.
So let's look at the dark side. Let's assume that you have a 22-year-old and they have an average credit card balance making the minimum monthly payment. Well, we know that right now the average interest rate for a credit card is somewhere around 17.76%. And most credit cards will allow you to make a minimum payment of either $25 or 3% of the outstanding balance, whichever one is higher. And we know that the average credit card balance right now is about $6,194. So let's take this 22-year-old person. They have $6,194 of credit card debt at 17.76%, and they're just going to pay the minimum payment. Well, when they do that, it actually takes them 14.9 years
That's crazy.
to pay off that balance. And that thing that only cost them $6,194 actually ends up accruing another $5,543 of interest for a total cost of $11,737, almost twice as much as it was originally worth.
So it's that death by 1,000 paper cuts, because you didn't get to $6,194 one time.
Nope.
What likely happened is you bought an iPhone, you bought some clothes, you bought some shoes. You might have, obviously putting groceries on this. It's not even all bad stuff.
Sure.
Look, in these dark times, I understand a lot of this might be necessity, but when you're using high interest credit card debt, here's what I don't like to see. When you turn $6,200 worth of credit card debt into something that's the equivalent of $12,000. That's almost double. But we wanted to show you, what if you weren't a victim in this situation to the dark side of compounding interest? What if you flipped the script? You were actually a saver. You were responsible. You passed the adult marshmallow test and actually started saving early and often. What would the same dollars out of your pocket and invest it? Meaning there's no change in behavior other than instead of you paying off credit card debt, now you're starting to invest and make this money work for you. What would that scenario look like?
So again, we want to compare apples to apples. So we just took that minimum payment that you were paying, whether it was the 3% or the $25, and we just invested that over the long term. Well, by the time the credit card is paid off, you will have saved $34,713 for retirement. Again, this just assumes an annual rate of return of 10%. That minimum payment, instead of paying your credit card, you invested it, earning 10%. You would have saved up, by the time you hit that 14.9 years, $34,713.
And I'm just repeating what you were basically sharing. $12,000 that was paid on the credit card debt, it was $11,700 and something, is now the equivalent at close to $35,000. But there's more to this story.
What happens if you think about that $34,000, almost $35,000 you've accumulated, and what can that really do for your long-term financial success? Well, it gets really, really exciting. If you just take that money, you don't add another dollar to it, but you allow it to stay invested until the time you get to 65, it turns into $573,711.
So realize, for less than, we know a car. Most people, when you look at what the average car in America is right now, it's close to $30,000.
Yep.
And you can quickly see that for something that was just $6,000, that's lifestyle stuff. That's clothing. That's furniture for the apartment. That's groceries, things like that. It could be over $500,000 from your retirement. Talking about ripple effects turning into waves, or the butterfly effect really impacting your financial life, this ought to scare you if you're not using compounding interest for your benefit.
I was going to say the same thing, Brian. When you're in 20s, you have a choice to make. Do you want compounding interest to be the thing that's rocket fuel, or do you want to be that damp blanket that you just can't get out from under?
And that's a great segue, because the next point we wanted to show on Pitfalls is not harnessing the power of your army of dollar bills or cutting off their full potential.
Yep.
And Bo, there's two great illustrations. I know you and Daniel worked on this long and hard. Let's go over, because this is a resource that you can actually sign up for right on moneyguy.com and use it to your benefit.
That's right. If you go to moneyguy.com and click on the resource page, you can actually download this right now. And you've heard us talk about this all the time, that $1 when you're 20 years old, if you invest that until the time you turn 65, can turn into $88.
That's incredible. incredible.
But that's just for a 20-year-old. Obviously, the numbers change when you're 25, 30, 35, 40, and so on. So you should go out there and check out our money multiplier deliverable, because not only can you see what happens at 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, we actually created a chart just for you guys that at every single age, you can see what your money multiplier is. So if you know that you're a 28-year-old and you've built up $50,000 of investment portfolio, you can take that $50,000, go multiply it by 29.7, and without saving another dollar, that's how much you're set up to have by the time you get to 65. So this should get you excited, not just about the future dollars that you were saving, but it should get you really juiced about the hard work you've already done, the time you've already put in.
So how much does that resource cost, by the way?
Absolutely nothing.
So go to moneyguy.com, sign up. We have all kind of resources on there. You're missing out if you don't go check out some of the free resources. And that leads to, I want to kind of close out the 20s. One last thing. We've already talked about the dangers of credit cards. We've talked about the dangers of not saving for the future. But there's one more. And I thought this was interesting. Daniel shared this one with us, is that he knows within his apartment complex, the landlords are starting to get nervous. Will they collect their rents? Because people are obviously struggling during this pandemic. So they sent out this crazy email that basically, and I loved what Daniel did. He took the text from the email, but then he changed it to our favorite resident. And it's basically a payday loan.
Payday loan.
So share the details of this, Bo.
So this is the actual email that Daniel, full-time equivalent Daniel, got, saying, hey, I know that you guys may be going through some trouble, and don't worry, there are resources out there. Here are 2 companies that are more than happy to help you make next month's rent payment.
So it sounds like if you just took that, you get this email, wow,
they're watching out for me.
My landlord is looking out for us. And then Daniel took it a step further. He went and researched each one of these resources. Look at the first one. Now, number uno, I don't know if the apartment complex looked at this. The first one, yes, you could get help with next month's rent, but they're going to charge you an interest rate of 99.99%. Guys, I don't have anything in my bat belt that will help you make 99.99% in the first year.
Nope.
That's criminal.
And if you even look at the second company, now it was better. It was a lot better.
Man, comparatively speaking, it seems like a deal, but we know that that's a ripoff too.
For only an average annual interest rate of 27%, you could borrow money to cover your rent. Guys, you will never get out of this hole if you dig yourself in there. If you're following the financial order of operations and you're covering your deductibles and you're getting your employer match and you're building an emergency fund, you should not have to do these things. These should be, I don't even want to say a last resort, because if you're having to do this kind of stuff, then you were just in a bad spot. These are not things that you need to be utilizing in your financial
It is
tool belt.
wild to me when credit cards look responsible compared to payday loans. So be very careful. Just do not touch. Beware of these type of tools.
Love it.
So I want to now transition to 30-year-olds. And we had a lot of conversation about this picture that Daniel picked out, because basically, Bo, this is you.
That's
you
me,
are
man.
in this messy middle as we speak.
The 30s is a very unique decade to be in, because a lot of life happens. Life gets more complicated. Things get more stressful. You got kids. You got stuff pulling you all over. So we think that there are a lot of pitfalls that you can fall into your 30s. And when the world around you is crumbling as well, it just exacerbates the issue. So we said, okay, what are some of the things that 30-year-olds should really be aware of and think about? Number one that we came up with was cash reserves.
Now, I think it's interesting. We did this in the 20s. We mentioned have your deductibles covered.
Yep.
We get it when you're younger. Cash is going to be hard. You're still getting your 10,000 hours. But by the time you're in your 30s, we're thinking, hey, you're starting to get some traction at work.
Yep.
You're starting to figure some things out. You need to go beyond just having deductibles covered. You need to have actually 3 to 6 months of cash reserves. So don't overlook that opportunity.
The next one at the 30s, as again, your financial circumstance, your life changes, so too do the risks that are present in your life. So we think that appropriate risk management is something that you have to make sure you're taking care of in your 30s. And what we mean is life insurance if there are folks depending on you. If you have a spouse that depends on your income, if you have children that depend on your income, and if you were to get hit by a bus tomorrow and that income went away and they would be negatively affected, you have an insurable interest. So you want to make sure you have your life insurance, your disability insurance. We statistically know that we are more likely to become disabled over our working careers than to have premature death. And then also estate planning. This is one that all of, I feel like, my friends miss. because we think in our 30s we're still living in that sort of warrior phase. We're still a little immortal. We're invincible. If it's difficult for you to have the conversation of who's going to take care of your kids if you're not here, or where you want the money to go if something were to happen to you, if it's hard for you and your spouse to have that conversation, just imagine how difficult those conversations would be if you weren't around to speak for yourself.
So make sure you have the basics covered on risk management. That is good advice. We've done so many shows on it. Go check it out. If this resembles you, get up and make something happen with this. Now this next one, Bo, it's going to sound like people are like, what? What's a pitfall about that?
Sure.
And this is a cautionary tale. I tell people about this one all the time. Paying off your mortgage early. If you're in your 30s, you realize 20-year-olds, it's great to have compounding interest in the wind at your back, growing your army of dollar bills so that essentially, let's think about this. When you invest in your 20s, it's essentially you're only contributing like 5 to 10% of your future retirement assets. The rest is coming from growth. Guess what happens in your 30s? It is your last stop on that easy money because every dollar you invest in your 30s also has multiplier effects with compounding interest.
Double digits.
What are we in right now? We are in the lowest interest rates in like history for mortgages. So, and I had, by the way, on the editing room floor of the Money Guy Show, I had 2 slides with comments from listeners. Now, look, you guys know, y'all made me cut them out of the show notes, so I'm not going to read them. But there are people, one of the gentlemen shared that all through the 2000s, he prepaid his mortgage, then lost his job, had to do a short sell, and he screwed up his credit. And he felt bad because he locked up his money. And here we are, fast forward, he's having job issues now, and he's saying he's going to now pay off his money. I'm like, whoa. You might need those cash reserves. So this is a twofold issue. When you're in your 30s, it's the messy 30s. You have kids. You have lots of obligations. You might, because realize when you pay that house off, it's great once the house is fully paid off. But if you start prepaying your mortgage, you have an emergency like you lose your job. It's not like it's easy to go get the money back out of the house. And I'm telling you, you're still totally missing out on the opportunity of what the potential, the opportunity cost for every dollar in your army of dollar bills is. There will be plenty of time in your late 40s to pay the debt off early. Focus on building your armies and not getting in a hurry to pay out the low interest rate debt too soon.
We've even done a show in the past called A Tale of Two Savers, and Reeve, maybe we should put a link to that in the description for this show or for this highlight. Actually walking you through what that $1 that retires mortgage debt versus that $1 that goes into your army, how different those two scenarios are. It's mind-blowing. When you're in your 30s, you have to make sure you understand that difference.
One last point. All over our comments section are people talking about taking retirement assets and paying down their mortgage. Guys, you realize when you pull money out for retirement, yes, it might be penalty-free under this coronavirus distribution. You're still going to pay income taxes. So to get $70, you're going to have to take $100 out of your portfolio. So all of a sudden, if you have a 401k with $20,000 or $50,000 that you want to take to pay off your mortgage, realize it's probably going to net you $30,000 to $35,000, but you're going to take $50 and pay income. It's just going to be a disaster. And it's going to be a hole that you're going to have a hard time recovering from. So be very careful of that. Let's move on to the next one because this is one that I love. The slide that was put in on this is kids' education.
Yeah, we all, once we have kids, they become our top priority, as they should. Well, a lot of times we incorrectly assume that because our kids are now our top priority, they should also become our financial top priority. So immediately, as soon as Junior or Juniette is born, we got to start funding that. Why'd y'all laugh at that? That's a good name. We got to start funding those college accounts. We got to start getting them and start building them up, even when that's not exactly where they're supposed to fall inside the financial order of operations.
You and I have done enough flights, and we've made the analogy on for past shows, is that they always tell you when you're on an airplane, please put the oxygen mask on your face first before you help the kiddos out. And it's kind of the same way with your retirement. Your kids can go get scholarships. Your kids can go get student loans. Retirement loans, little iffy if that's going to happen. Here's what the actual new retirement, what is funny, I've been making this joke for years. And I am so happy that this has come full circle, that what I have threatened talked about and envisioned has actually come true. As I tell people all the time, look, you can get this right or you can get this wrong, but if you get it wrong, you just need to let Junior know you're moving in the basement at some point in the future. And once you know it, the New York Times has an article that just came out. One of our clients, Money Guy family members, sent this to me. I loved it. Look at the article headline. My retirement plan is you. If your kids go, Mom, Dad, why don't we have more money for college? I want you to show them this and be like, it's because I'm not going to live in your basement. Because look at this headline and look at the picture. I mean, this sweet woman, her sweet son. I'm glad that they like being with each other because he's got her. That's the retirement plan for her right there.
Now, look, don't miss here. So there's nothing wrong if you want to have an in-law suite or you want to have the grandparent suite and they want to come live with you. But when that happens, you want it to be because you chose to, not because you were the backstop. And the single best gift, you always say this, the single best gift that we as parents can give our kids is to not live in their basement in the future. Unless they invite us to.
Yeah, unless you choose to, not because you're the retirement. My retirement plan is you. That is a nightmare right there. So let's move on, because this one is sad, but it's true with what's going on right now.
A nice segue.
With COVID, because we just made fun of, moving in with your kids, but it is sad right now because what is going on with COVID is we're telling people who are in the at-risk category, that's people, 65 and older, who have underlying conditions, we kind of isolating them. I mean, it is complete isolation. So make sure that you're not losing touch with loved ones when we're facing such a unique time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where just we kind of forget about it, especially those of us as parents. We're not able to go see the grandparents and do that kind of stuff. It probably is pretty important that we do the FaceTime phone calls, the Zoom phone calls, just so that we can keep those bonds attached. Because we don't really know, depending on what part of the country you're in, when things will go back to normal. So we just want to make sure that we don't lose track of that. Because some of those relationships are going to be hard to build back up if they go away.
And then we put this one as a reminder. We spent a lot more time on this in the 20s. So I'd encourage you, if you're watching one of the highlight segments, go back and look at the multiplier effect. This is the last one in the 30s, is don't forget, and please do not cut off your army of dollar bills. If you go to moneyguy.com, we have a great resource talking about 88 times over. It really shows you the value of what the potential is for every dollar in your army of dollar bills if you'll just put the money to work. Don't let this downturn cut that out to where you get to retirement decades in the future and go, what happened? Where did I go off track? Where did I derail? You're going to unfortunately have a lot more perspective of that's where things really went off track. It was right there in 2020.
That's exactly right. And again, the 30s, you've already said this, it bears repeating. It is the last decade that you get a double-digit multiplier. Because once you get into the next decade, once you get in the 40s, it's single digits from there on out.
And guess who resembles that? Let's talk about 40-year-olds. Because here's the financial pitfalls for 40-year-olds is that I think a lot of people, and I've kind of alluded to this on for the 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, but I'm seeing a lot of comments out there on our YouTube channel, derail retirement plans. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. When we're talking about COVID distributions, 401k loans, be very careful, guys. Because look, when you're in your 40s, you kind of see over the hill. You kind of see where retirement's coming. And if you take those assets away, you might find in 20 years you're not where you want to be.
And I just want a common misnomer out there, because I hear this all the time, Brian. I'll be talking to someone in their 40s and say, hey, I want to put a swimming pool in the backyard, okay? And I've got this big 401k balance because I've been such a good saver. But look, I can do this. I'm just going to borrow from my 401k. I'm going to pay myself back. And I'm going to pay myself back interest. So it's kind of like a win-win. I get to be my own personal banker. What you don't realize is when you think about this 88 times over concept, when you are pulling your army, your soldiers out of the army, you are doing irreparable damage to building up your squadron. So you just have to be very, very, very careful not to take those soldiers off the field.
So you turn our soldiers into a squadron of airplanes.
Yeah,
I don't know if you recognize that. That's pretty powerful. That is how powerful
in my
20
head,
and 30-year-olds are.
Halfway in there, I got into a football analogy and had to get back out talking about the sidelines. I kind of went squirrely on that one.
O's. But that's a great lead in to, because look, we all have senior moments. And it warms my heart that in your 30s you're starting to have them, because here's the next one. Always be a student of life. And are you changing with times? Because, and here's why we put this up. We don't want to have you. I've done too many Zoom calls. I've done group Zoom calls. It doesn't matter if it's one of your children's schools. It doesn't matter if it's your church.
Professional organizations.
Professional. Oh my! Continuing ed, where you're showing up in bathrobes. I mean, I've had so many instances where I've had people who've had half their face cut off because they didn't realize how the camera worked. We've had other people who, and Daniel even put one on here. He thought it was funny.
Yeah, so we'll bring it up. Apparently, this person said her boss turned herself into a potato on Microsoft Teams, but she couldn't figure out how to undo the potato setting. So for the whole meeting, she was boss potato because, again, she wasn't keeping up with the times. So basically, our lesson here is don't be boss potato. Know what you're doing. Make sure you stay up with the times.
Well, you don't want to be the one that has to get the print drivers installed every time something's going on. Try to keep up with what's going on with technology. Be a student. Don't get set in your ways, because if you're not a student of life, you're kind of going to get left behind.
I hear you say that all the time, Brian. One of the things you have to make sure that you continue to do in your 40s is be that lifetime learner. And one of the things you can do as being a lifetime learner is learning, even though you're older and wiser and have more years, there's still some stuff you can glean from your younger colleagues, from your younger counterparts. I'm not looking forward to this day, but I'm already kind of starting to this happen. There are kind of some things I can learn from my kids. The other day I got upset and my daughter reminded me of the Daniel the Tiger song, what you do when you get mad. And I was like, oh my gosh, she just told me to, curb my temper.
By your daughter.
I got schooled by a 4-year-old. But I think, recognizing that can still happen is a valuable thing to not lose hold of.
Now, when I wrote the show notes, I was kind of shooting for coworkers, but if you want to throw your kids in there, a 4-year-old, I mean, we have to set the bar somewhere, Bo. So I appreciate you setting it so low.
I'm equal opportunity.
So let's move on to the next one, which is, because this does tie in, and like I said, I'm in my 40s. I resemble this, not taking your health seriously. Look, it is easy, guys. The COVID-19, and not to make light of it, but for a lot of people, it's the COVID-15.
That's right.
Because a lot of people have used this, they've quit working out, they're not able to go to the gym, they're not watching what they eat, and you're seeing people gain weight. Now I worry about what the long-term ramifications from a health perspective from all the people who are not paying attention. So this goes outside of pandemics, because I will tell you, I heard this advice while I was in my 30s, and then now that I'm in my late 40s, I've tried to use it. When you're in your early 40s, you do have a kind of fork in the road moment is, are you going to stay healthy by exercising, keeping your cardiovascular health up? Because it goes downhill pretty quick. I'm just telling you, I'm so glad that I'm still exercising. And look, I hate exercising. I do it to stay above ground. And I have found that during this pandemic, when we've had these home orders, stay-at-home orders, I've actually missed it, not because emotionally, but just because I like how I feel from a physical perspective. So don't take your health for granted.
And it's, again, one of those things, just like in your 20s, if you're not being serious about how devastating credit card debt or any debt can be, in your 40s, if you're not realizing how devastating it can be to become unhealthy, it's a hard hill to walk back up. And sometimes you can't walk back up that hill, so you got to stay aware of that.
So here's a good one to close out the 40s, because we've talked about this. We've done whole shows on this. If you don't know your why, you're kind of like a rudderless ship. And I think this picture, we have a lot of fun in our pre-show meetings, but we were talking about how this guy is a perfect setup for a midlife crisis. Because just look at him, he's longingly looking out the window. He's holding his luggage, so this guy is traveling week in, week out, and he's probably asking, what am I doing? The heck am I doing? This is why people have midlife crises, is because they get to a point in life and they're on this rat race. They're on the interstate running as fast as they can. They look around and go, why am I here? Why did I do this? So you need to pay attention to what is the why in your life so that you can make sure you feel like you have purpose, so you have fulfillment, and it's going to create happiness. When we've done all the shows on happiness, fulfillment, this why component is so, so powerful for you.
In my experiences, we've been working, because we work with clients all over the country in all sorts of different walks of life. It's so funny. I found the ones that get the most excited about retirement, the ones who get the most excited about financial independence, are the ones who started framing that why early on. The folks who just did exactly what you did and they get to the end of the rat race and they're at 55, 60, 65, we always ask, okay, you know what you're retiring from. Have you spent any time thinking about what you're retiring to? And they're like, no, I have no idea. What's beautiful is if you can figure that out in your 40s, it can make your last 10, 15, 20, 25 working years so much sweeter as you know the thing that you're moving towards.
Well, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People begin with the end in mind. Right. I mean, if you're not, you really are a rudderless ship just out there moving across the ocean without any purpose or knowing even where you're navigating to. So pay attention to that. And that leads to a transition. We want to talk about 50 plus. We're talking about 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds. It doesn't matter. Here's the pitfalls you need to avoid here is don't forget, Bo, you had a conversation today with somebody.
Yep, sure did.
Don't forget that your portfolio is still long-term.
Yeah, I get it saddens me so much when I talk to someone who's recently retired or near retirement, like, okay, hey, I'm ready to go to all cash, or I'm ready to go to all fixed income, I'm ready to go all CDs. And I have to remind them, hey, just because you're 50, 55, 60, 65 years old, if we're planning for an age 95, 100, 105 years old, some part of your portfolio still needs to be structured for 30, 40, 50 years. And if you're not doing that, if you're only structuring all of your portfolio for the next 2 to 3 years, it might not be as sustainable as you once thought it was.
Well, and think about the fact interest rates, here's something that's happened because of what's happened, is interest rates have gone to the cellar. Mm-hmm. They're pretty much zero. You have to have some component of your assets positioned for growth, even for 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, not all of it. Look, I want you to have plenty of liquidity.
Sure.
I want you to have plenty of security. That's why we like asset allocation, a diversified portfolio. But your portfolio is going to be long-term, even for my 70-year-olds out there watching this. You're going to want that portfolio to make it 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years in the future. That means there's probably be a component in there that will be long-term and need to be invested. And that leads to our next one. Don't be ignorant to your mortality.
Yeah, it's so obvious right now when you think about COVID and some of the precautions you take. If you have a comorbidity, probably don't go out in big groups. Make sure you're washing your hands. Make sure, you're doing the things that are necessary to protect yourself. Don't just assume, oh, well, I've always been healthy, I'm invincible. No, life kind of changes as we get older, and so you need to be aware of and reticent of those changes as we age.
Well, I think it's also, you could take this as a glass half full opportunities. It could be part of your communication plan. Having an estate plan that you not only are thinking about how you want things to play out at end of life decisions, but also how you bring in loved ones so that they're part of this discussion. That could be a very beneficial, good thing. Talk about turning a negative into a positive. Start having those hard conversations, but also very powerful conversations for you and your loved ones. So be very proactive on, don't be ignorant that you are mortal. We're not going to be here forever.
Another glass half full one that I think is just so, this one gets me kind of excited because I think about real life, real world examples of folks that we know. Are folks who recognize in their 50s, hey, you can still have a second act. It's not like the thing that you've done, you just got to okay, well, I guess I'm done. I guess I'm done living life. No, you can kind of reinvent, refine, rediscover yourself in your 50s and beyond. And I think that's kind of awesome. That's kind of a beautiful thing about this life that we get to live.
We had 2 examples that came up when we were doing pre-show. Reby, our producer, the Money Guy producer, her mother, Dina, who's become a fan, not because of us. We know it's because she knows her daughter is kind of the cat herder behind the scenes. And Dina, though, got the kids kind of out there working or in college, went back, was already a nurse, went back and got a second act as kind of starting her career after she got the kids out. We have Carol, a lot of you guys who work with us, who you go from Money Guy fan to Money Guy client who's part of Abound Wealth. You've probably talked to Carol at some point. Carol is the second most designated person at our firm. Did you like how I threw that in?
She is tied for second. I agree with you.
She was a CPA, worked in public accounting for the Big 8, which is now the Big 4, but back then it was the Big 8. Helped raise the kids. Has come to work for us. Now she's got a CFP as well. Yep. And that's just incredible that she has had her second act and is such a powerful resource here for the firm. And I think that's a cool thing. If you don't, this is the part I also like. We've already talked about begin with the end in mind. Yep. If you do realize you love working, guys, that's not a horrible retirement. If you actually enjoy and you get fulfillment and purpose out of work, because Carol doesn't have to work.
No.
But she gets a lot of fulfillment out of doing it, and I think that's the value add I get from this situation.
That's exactly right. Okay, next pitfall that we talk about, and this is one riddled all throughout The Millionaire Next Door. One of the things you have to be careful about, we already mentioned earlier on when we were talking about our 30s, our children tend to become our top priority, and sometimes so much so that we even derail our own plans. One of the things we have to make sure we're careful of in our 50s is not to fall victim or allow ourselves to fall victim to economic outpatient care.
There are so many indicators. If anybody who's read The Millionaire Next Door, we talk about to be a prodigious accumulator of wealth, meaning you're building up. If you take the Millionaire Next Door formula and you multiply the results by 2, that's a prodigious accumulator of wealth. That means you're really good with your resources. When they go through the checklist of what all these people have in common, one of the key things is their adult children actually do leave the nest.
Yep.
And they leave the nest without receiving monthly, annual contributions from their parents. They don't get that economic outpatient care. And here's something that I think is interesting from the research from Millionaire Next Door is that you'll see 2 children, one successful, one's not as successful. Usually the research shows the parents are over here trying to fix the situation by throwing resources at this child that's struggling. And then they look at it and go, I don't understand how this child, I don't give them anything and they keep thriving, growing. It's because your economic outpatient care is probably keeping some hard decisions from happening.
Yep.
And since there's no learning from the hardship, you just funneling money, so you're actually hurting them and you're hurting your long-term financial life as well.
We said it, the best financial gift that we can give our kids is to not live in their basement. The second best gift we can give them is to teach them how to not have to live in their kid's basement.
Go check out some of our shows on this because, guys, we talk about why your kids before they're out of the house as an adulthood, when they're teenagers, when they're even younger, if they start doing side jobs and things, encourage the saving, encourage the investing, do a matching program. I do that with my daughter.
Yep.
She actually, to see her get excited about saving and investing for the future, I know I'm laying fundamental things that will forever pay dividends that I'm awakening her financial mutant status, so she's going to have her own army of dollar bills. That's powerful, and that keeps her off of the economic outpatient care.
Love it.
The last one we had on here, Bo.
Oh, man, this is such a good one right now.
Well, I mean, it's big because we know. I turned on a Today Show this morning. My wife watches Today Show, and oh my gosh, guys, it is depression fest. Now, fortunately, this pandemic is subsiding. The numbers are going down. You would never know that watching the Today Show, and it saddened me because I look at morning newscasts, especially the national. They're supposed to be kind of just like you get your jolt from your coffee of good news.
Sure.
That's what you kind of count on from your daily talk shows. I mean, your morning shows is because you're counting on them while you're drinking your coffee, give you a little bit of jolt of good news and stuff. And to see it be so sad, it's just not happy.
And what I think is so interesting, Brian, is that it's not just COVID. It's not just the pandemic, especially when it comes to financial matters and the financial media. It seems to me like very rarely are they telling a positive story. Are they giving you that jolt of good news? And so one of the illustrations we put together is, how good is the media at telling you how bad things actually are? We actually went back to the Great Recession, coming out of it in 2009, and we just wanted to go look at some of the headlines that have happened from 2009 all the way through 2019. And so what you can see on the screen, we'll read some of these actual headlines. Behind that, we just have the S&P 500. What the actual market has done. The risk of a double-dip recession is rising. Time to say it, double-dip recession may be happening. How about fast forward a few years? Why America's banks are predicting a big recession, or 6 signs we're closer to the next recession than you think. This is a decade of negative headlines, when really the market was doing some pretty remarkable, pretty incredible things.
You can see it was close to tripling during that period. The thing I find interesting from this is there really wasn't a break. You can always find something to be concerned about. You can always find something to be stressful about. Look, I know this is unique, but just put that in your mindset that a lot of times, because we know the media, how does the media get paid? Unfortunately, it's all through advertising. It's all through trying to keep your eyeballs and your ears glued to it. Yep. So, and they know the human condition is we absorb negative information much easier and come back to it and actually stay tuned for negative stuff much easier than positive. And unfortunately, that's just where we are in society with the way our media works it. So just be aware of that. It still can be a great resource. You just need to kind of protect yourself, know your why, know how much you need to be saving for your goals, know what every dollar is doing, being a good field general for your army of dollar bills. All these things are going to protect you. So outside influences, they kind of bounce off you like Teflon because you've already understand your purpose and what you're doing. But the biggest thing, these are financial pitfalls by all ages. And look, we put this specifically thinking about pandemics because we know right now we have super high unemployment. We also have people being paid not to work, but it's not going to always be like this. So we wanted to go ahead and create the trigger points, let you evaluate and figure out what's going on in your financial life so that you can make the right path forward.
And we are going to stay the resource for you guys as we do see scary times. This won't be the last unique thing that we go through, but we're going to try to continue to make resources available to you. If you haven't had a chance to go to the website, go to moneyguy.com, click on the resource page, go download the deliverables. The Money Multiplier deliverable is one that's right there available to you guys. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, ring the bell to get notifications because we are going to stay your resource for getting you sound, good, positive financial information when you need it.
And then here's one more positive thing to close it out with. Just last week, we took some pictures because we were in 41 states. We work with clients in 41 states now. Thank you guys for kind of taking the relationship to the next level, starting off as a Money Guy listener, but then transitioning. And that we call it the abundance cycle because all we want you to do, you probably, if you're tuning in the first time, you're like, wow, these guys give away a lot of analytical stuff. They give a lot of data points. What's the catch here? There is no catch other than this. We want you to come learn, apply, and grow, meaning you come and take as much free information as you want. Use our entire, we've been doing this years. We've been creating content since 2006. Come, absorb, and use it. Apply it, grow it. You will reach a level of success. I'm completely confident. We've seen this. We're generationally changing the way people are processing money. And that has allowed us, because people do reach a level of success, they go, wait a minute. This is getting complicated. I need help with this. Or I want to ensure that if I'm not here to speak for me, that at least I know my spouse is going to have somebody who thinks like I do. And that's when you're going to remember the abundance cycle, the guys who kind of planted the seeds, and hopefully we'll be working with clients in 50 states
That's our goal.
In no time. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.